Introduce our speaker for this evening, Don L. from Bellingham, Washington.
Hi, everybody. I'm Don Landis. I'm an alcoholic. If you can hear me, somebody give me the thumbs up so I know we're connecting. Fantastic. Thank you for that. Michael, thanks for the introduction and for chairing the meeting tonight. Anthony, thank you for the invitation to come and participate. I don't take my membership in Alcoholics Anonymous lightly. And when you're asked to do anything in AA, I really think it's an honor and privilege. And certainly being able to come and tell your story at a meeting is a big deal. And I've always taken it seriously, but I don't think it's any bigger of a deal just to be an everyday member of Alcoholics Anonymous, be able to go to meetings with people like you and enjoy the gift of sobriety one more day. Uh, I want to be clear that it was a gift for a long time. I didn't think I wanted. I never wanted to get sober. I never considered getting sober in the early part of my drinking. Uh, the first bit of trouble or consequences that came into my life, I never tapped the brake. I just figured it was the price you paid for the life I was living. And then once I wanted to be sober, once the fun was gone, once the votes were counted and the evidence was in that a guy like me shouldn't drink, and every negative aspect of my life was associated with my drinking, and I found that I could not stop, I just knew that sobriety wasn't in the cards for me. So the fact that I have a sobriety date of September 16th, 1991, well over 29 years sober, living the best life I've ever known, surrounded by the best people I've ever known. I'm not just grateful to be sober, I'm a little amazed. And there's some new people on tonight. I want to congratulate you for getting sober. I want to congratulate you for being early in sobriety and let you know that we've all been there. And I know that's of no comfort to you. It was no comfort to me when I was new. And well-meaning people would say, I've been right where you are. And I was like, would you like to change places? Because I did not like where I was early in sobriety. But we really do know a lot about you. Nobody gets here on a winning streak. So well done. And please know that we're pulling for you. That is what our society only has one job. We're in the saving lives business. We're Alcoholics Anonymous. We're a bunch of drunks trying to help each other. And nobody's better than or worse than. We're all equal. And this is a process, regardless of how long people have been sober. We do this thing shoulder to shoulder, and we support each other. So very grateful to be here. Very grateful to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was talking to a guy I sponsor earlier today, and we were talking about how convinced we are when we get here that our story before we came to AA, in particular for a lot of us, how we grew up, has something to do with our alcoholism, and how kind of disappointed we are when we find out that's not true. And I'm not going to spend any real time talking about my childhood. Just to let you know, because I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, I've had that experience of living two separate lives, the life of the drunkard and the life of the sober member of AA. But I've also had two childhoods, right? I got the childhood I brought in here with me, uh, which is tragic. If I talk about my childhood just right, hopefully somebody listening will feel sorry for me, which was always my intention when I talked about, my mom's alcoholism and the dad that deserted the family and the tough neighborhood and on and on and on. And really, that story was very valuable to me. Why? Uh, it's an explanation for a poorly lived life. The cool thing about being a victim is it's really not your fault. So every drink you take with impunity. You can comfort yourself like, yeah, I know I'm a loser. Yeah, I know I've blown my life up. Yeah, I know I hurt people. But, it's really not my fault. If you came from where I came from and the things happened to you that happened to me, you'd have probably turned out the same way. And it's this way of letting myself off the hook. But you come to AA and you get a sponsor. And what happened to me is I worked the 12 steps. And in particular, I got to the inventory process. And in the inventory process, I did what it talked about. I simply wrote down in black and white what really happened. And it wasn't that I was lying about my perception of my childhood. It was just an incomplete picture. You see, I seem to remember everything that was wrong with my childhood and nothing that was right. And the truth was, through inventory, I found out I had every opportunity to excel at the game of life. than any young man could have been afforded. And for whatever reason, I ended up at age 31 in Alcoholics Anonymous, more dead than alive. Turns out it didn't have very much to do with family or environment or bad breaks or misunderstandings. And that's important for me because if I'm going to get traction in my recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm going to have to stop being a victim in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous to finally get the gift of this program. Because what we got here is a program for the individual, and I've got to get in touch with that and start taking responsibility for the things I've done in my life and start being really honest about what's happened before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. But I got to AA the old fashioned way, drinking and failure. It's a tried and true combination. Many of us get here with that double edged sword, and it certainly worked in my case. And I got to tell you, I didn't see it coming. And nobody in my family saw it coming. I got good grades. I was our graduating class athlete in high school. I had 40 scholarship offers to go play basketball. All these things that if you looked at me from the outside, you would have thought I was a guy that was going places. And the funny thing about all of that is on the inside, where really, my life has really played out. You can't see that there's always been something wrong with me. Now, I'm not going to say it's alcoholism. I don't know if I was born alcoholic, but I know this. I was born a little weird. You know what I mean? Half a bubble off a plum, just a little uncomfortable in my own skin. And lots of people are that way growing up. That's the passage of youth. Many of us have uncomfortability in our lives that don't end up being alcoholic. But I'll tell you, I've heard men and women tell their stories in Alcoholics Anonymous for a long time. And when we talk about getting drunk for the first time, there's a consistency in our stories. It sounds some variation of this. I got drunk for the first time at 17 and I felt 10 feet tall. I felt smarter, more confident, funnier, better looking. And we talk about it as though it's delusion or fantasy. I'm not sure. The big book of Alcoholics Anonymous flatly states that every man and woman is blessed with certain skills, aptitudes, and abilities. We'll call those our gifts from God. These are the things about myself I've always suspected that were there, always knew I was good at, didn't really have to work at. And everybody's got their own set of gifts. But I'll tell you, what have they always felt like they were just outside of your fingertips? Something in AA we like to refer to as potential. And then for me, something as magnificent as alcohol comes into my life at age 17. And suddenly these gifts from God, my birthright, if you will, no longer is it suspected. No longer is it potential. Now I've got these gifts firmly in my hand. And that invisible wall that they can't see, but I can feel that separates me from the world, that wall comes down. And suddenly you put a couple of drinks in a guy like me, it's not fantasy and it's not delusion. I am funnier and I am stronger and I am faster and I am smarter and I am better looking, damn it. In fact, it's no more complicated than this. I like the version of myself with a couple of drinks in me better than the version of myself sober. And it really doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. And if I could have stopped the game there, I wouldn't have had to come to Alcoholics Anonymous. But I'm an alcoholic. And I have the physical component of our malady, the allergic reaction, where if I put any alcohol in my system of any type, something abnormal happens in me that makes it virtually impossible for me to stop drinking. And that progresses very rapidly in my story. Some people, it takes years for that to develop. Really, the first time I drank, I got drunk. And the only thing that really changed over the years when I drank was, volume and what I was drinking. But I always drank for effect. I've never understood any other kind of drinking. But I want to be clear, if I have this abnormal relationship with alcohol, where I put it in my system and suddenly I can't stop drinking, this phenomenon of craving that's talked about in the doctor's opinion in the front of the big book. If I'm aware of that, if I'm conscious, like, oh my God, something very strange is happening to me, perhaps early in my drinking, I could have done something about it. But one of the things about our ailment, malady, disease, whatever you want to call it, is it doesn't feel unnatural in our own bodies. I have never, I want to be clear about this. I've never taken a drink and thought to myself, oh, I'm drinking too much. I've never taken a drink and said, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. Every drink I've ever taken in my life has felt like the right amount at the right time and absolutely necessary and accurate. I My drinking to myself is not confusing and baffling. Other people's drinking is confusing and baffling. And you know what I'm talking about. You know, you're in the bar, it's 11 o'clock at night, you got there at 5 p.m. You have an investment of time, energy, and money, and it's just getting good. You know, the music's perfect. The waitress you weren't interested in now has potential. You're hanging out with these guys that you just met, but now you're lifelong friends. You're making plans. You're going to start a business. I mean, it's a beautiful Thursday night. And then some guy stands up, looks at his watch, and goes, oh my God, I had no idea it was getting so late. I have to work tomorrow. And he goes home. You see, that's confusing and baffling to me. I don't understand that kind of drinking. See, once you light my fire, we're going and we're going all the way. And I don't know that that's different. I don't know that other people have breaks regarding their drinking. I don't have any breaks. I'm all accelerator. I don't know how other people and their relationship with alcohol differs from mine. And I'm not interested in it really. And I love the effect produced by alcohol. And if alcohol allows me to access this untapped potential, where when I drink, I feel stronger, smarter, better looking, more confident, how would I care what anybody else thinks about that? Because I'm human, and most human beings, everything you do in your life, you do to produce a feeling, and you're trying to produce good feelings. And at 17, I fell in love with the effect that alcohol produced in me. In a word, it's relief. Relief from what swirls around in my head when I'm in a sober state. I get better when I drink, not worse. I get calmer when I drink, not worse. I get happier when I drink, not depressed. Early in my drinking, it seems to be a cure all. But I've got a full life. When I start drinking, I got a full life. And in fact, my life got fuller early in my drinking. By the time I'm 23, you know, I got an office, a secretary, two assistants. I'm hiring and firing a crew of 100 people in an aerospace company. You know, I'm the guy you look at. I'm a boy wonder. I'm going places. But what you can't see is what's going on the inside and how my alcoholism is progressing. And the thing about progression, it's interesting. We talk about that a lot in AA, progressively fatal illness. And if you would ask me what I thought progression was when I got here, I would have said, well, you drink more, you drink more often, and you drink harder stuff, right? That's progression. But that's not true. We all drink a little bit differently, you know, and we drink differently with different condiments. In fact, the only thing we have in common is the physical aspect, the phenomenon of craving. But here's what I think progression is. As shocking as this may seem, there was a time in my life where I didn't have to be drunk to have a good time. There was a time in my life where I didn't have to be drunk to take a complete deep breath. You know, all I needed was a green athletic field and some of my buddies in a free afternoon, and I was playing sports and I wasn't drunk and I was having a ball. I was self contained. There was a time where all I needed to do was be with a pretty girl, going to a concert, hanging out at the beach, whatever. And it was magical. You know, alcohol at one point in my life, you know, was an additive to an already full life. You take all those things, you know, trip to the beach, beautiful girl, playing ball, and always, you know, you add whiskey to that, it just gets better. But that's what alcohol was to me. But I had an ability to enjoy life in a somewhat sober state or even completely sober. But by the time I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, not that long later, I had a complete and utter inability to experience joy in a sober state. And we wonder why people come to Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And they have the same trouble we have. They have the same consequences we have. They have the same pain and failure, guilt and shame that we have. And they make a nice beginning and they stop drinking and they seem to be doing well. And a short time later, they go back to the grinder. They go back to the very machine that chewed them up and spit them out and had them wash ashore in Alcoholics Anonymous. yet they go back to the very thing that they said, I can't take it anymore, and showed up with us. Why is that? And I think it's about untreated alcoholism. I think it's about the muscle of alcoholism. You see, the muscle isn't what happens to me when I drink. It's what happens to a guy like me when I don't drink. In a doctor's opinion, it's referred to as a state of irritable, restless, and discontentness. But for me, it's that I call it this: I have an inability to experience joy when I'm sober. And I experience that over and over because by the time I'm 25 years old, right? The votes are counted. You know what I mean? Everybody knows I shouldn't drink. I mean, every negative aspect of my life right alongside that is a drink of alcohol. But the problem is I've been going through this brainwashing, right? Where I've got these delusions about what my problem is. You know, because everyone that knows me and everybody that loves me, who by the way is none of these people are alcoholic. And none of these people have been to Alcoholics Anonymous. So what they're trying to do is look at what my life looks like to them and what they would do and what would work for them. And these are my family members, my athletic coaches, friends that have known me forever, girlfriends, employers, doctors that have stitched me up. All these people have been in my life from time to time, all saying basically the same thing. You're a great guy. You got a lot of potential. You could probably be anything you wanted to be if you just quit drinking. You'd be so happy if you just quit drinking. You could go anywhere you wanted to go if you just quit drinking. So what do? I lay my experience against that and I evaluate it, right? Let's see. Smack that guy, I was drinking. Went to jail, I was drinking. Blew up the job, I was drinking. Blew up the relationship, I was drinking. Yeah, you got a point there. And it's easy for a guy like me to identify whiskey as the culprit and stop it right there. I'm convinced that I'm a perfectly wonderful human being as long as I don't drink. It's easy for me to blame the whiskey, but nobody has an adequate explanation for this. How come if my drinking's the problem? And I'm here to admit that it's the thing tearing my life apart. How come every time I quit, within 2 to 5 days, I start getting irritable, restless, and discontent? The color starts dripping out of the pitcher and the world starts to look and feel gray. I start to wonder if I made a rash decision with this quitting drinking thing. And I stop being able to experience joy. You see, I quit drinking. Everybody in my life is delighted. Everybody's thrilled when a guy like me quits drinking. Only one person isn't delighted, and that's me. And I'm confused and I'm baffled because I've been brainwashed into believing that my very survival and success in life and happiness depends on me quitting drinking. Well, you know what? I've quit drinking and I'm miserable and I'm getting crazier by the day and I don't know what to do about it. And when I arrive in that, and that happens to me quickly, 2 to 5 days, and then a little voice that sounds a lot like me pops up in my head and it says one word and one word only. And that word is forever. And once I hear that word in my head, I've entered into a period of negotiation with the first drink, and I don't even know it. You're going to feel this way forever. And if I'm convinced that sobriety is nothing more than a colorless, gray existence where I can't experience joy, how long do you think I can possibly hold on? And I go back to the drink again and again and again. I know everything there is to know about powerlessness. I know everything there is to know about quitting drinking and not being able to stay stopped. You know, I'd love to tell you something right wing, badass AA, like I came to AA September 16th, 1991, and I haven't found it necessary to take a drink. And that is, technically that's accurate. But that would lead you to believe that I haven't slipped. I slipped for 5 or 6 years, damn near every day. I just didn't do it under the bright lights of AA. I know what it's like to wake up every day with it in the room with me. You know, that thought like, oh God, I'm dying here. I'm dying. Please, God, not tonight. I got to take a night off. I can't keep doing this. Yet that night I'm drunk again. I don't know what kind of strength and perseverance and courage it takes to slip in front of members of Alcoholics Anonymous and keep coming back, to walk back in the rooms after you've lost your sobriety and walk in here. And I've always been confused and surprised and a little ashamed of the way that sometimes we talk to each other when we come back to AA after slipping. And we say things as though we had never had that experience ourselves. And I'm here to offer that I think every man and woman in AA knows a lot about slipping. I don't think most of us woke up one day and said, boy, my life's really good, except for that drinking thing. I think I'll go to AA, and then stayed sober the rest of our life. I haven't met that person, but I've met a lot of people that struggled with it on their own until they finally reached out for help. Now I know everything there is to know about slipping. And the problem with loving a guy like me, if you're a family member or my girlfriend or my employer or something like that, and you watch me quit drinking just to drink, quit drinking to pick up another drink, time and time again, you might come to one or two conclusions. One, I'm a liar, right? And nothing could, of course I'm not. I didn't understand there's no room for the truth where the game of alcoholism is played out. You see, I've lost the power of choice. So I don't have the power to honor the promise. And I don't know that. So I'm bringing a knife to a gunfight. Every time I quit drinking, I meant it. Every time I quit drinking, I was done once and forever. And I quit drinking 100 times. And if you love me and you watch me quit 100 times and drink 100 times, the other conclusion you might come to is he's really not trying very hard. And we know that's not true, man. Who tried harder than we did, right? Who tried harder than we did? I mean, don't you understand? I have a front row seat for the destruction of my life. You think what I wanted my life to turn out this way? You think I was raised this way? You think I'm unaware of the failure and pain in my own life? Come on. Nobody wants to live this way. I live the kind of life by the time I come to AA that if you put a normal, healthy, mature person in my life for half a day, they would go screaming down the street in terror. But for me, due to repetition to the alcoholic life, for me, it was Tuesday. It was Friday night. It was Monday morning. Alcoholism will allow me to live a life that's unacceptable, and I'll accept it. My alcoholic life will feel the only normal one. And I came to Alcoholics Anonymous September 16th, 1991, with no delusions that I would ever get sober. I didn't come here to get sober. I mean, that's how magnificent AA is. I mean, think about that. A guy convinced to the marrow of his bones that he would never be sober. I had already surrendered to the idea I was going to die drunk. Because if you quit drinking only to drink again 100 times, you'll lose the will to do battle with King Alcohol. I was just tired of fighting. So I knew I was going to die drunk. I came here to buy some time, figure out my next move, get the heat off. I was in a lot of trouble. And thank goodness that AA does not work because of the alcoholic, but rather AA works in spite of the alcoholic. Because if the raw material that I bring to the game of recovery has anything to do with a successful outcome, I'm a dead man. Because what do I bring here, right? Except fierce resentment, horrible buckets of fear, misunderstanding, old ideas, and prejudice. Not a lot to work with. But I walked into a place called the Simi Valley Alano Club at the low point of my existence. And my second night of recovery, I hit the lottery. You know what I mean? And something big had to happen in my life. And I think if we look back at our stories, for many of us, everything happened right on time. It's like catching lightning in a bottle. And it was my second night in AA. I'd gone to the 6:00 meeting. I'm waiting for the 8:00 meeting to start. And I didn't look that night the way I look tonight. You know what I mean? I got hair down the middle of my back and it's filthy because I don't shower anymore. I got a full beard with food stuck in it. I'm at the low point of my existence. I'm wearing my sunglasses at night, my arms folded on my chest, my tough guy radar out. I'm 6'5", 280 pounds, and I know how to keep people away from me when I want to. And they're leaving me alone, man. At the Simi Valley Alano Club, they are leaving me alone because I'm dangerous, because I'm terrified. And anybody terrified is dangerous. In my head, where the big book says my alcoholism mainly resides, starts talking to me. Look at them, Don. Look how clean they are and happy. And they don't want you here. What are you doing? Why are you doing this to us? Oh, you're quitting drinking again? And you know you're going to drink again. You always drink again. You're going to take this pain for a couple of days and then you're going to drink anyway. I'll tell you what, why don't we bypass the pain, get out of here and go get a drink? And I'm leaving Alcoholics Anonymous on my second night, not because AA doesn't work or God doesn't exist or the steps aren't a miracle. I'm leaving AA because I'm suffering from an obsession of the mind that compels me to go get a drink that's beyond my human power to do battle with it. You see, I've lost the power of choice. I have to go get drunk. And it's going to cost me everything, right? It's going to cost me my place of residence. It's going to cost me the last relative that don't have anything to do with me. And it's probably going to cost me my life. And that's a small price to pay if you can make the madness in my head stop for a couple of hours. And I've been always willing to pay that price. My own history shows that I've been willing to pay that price. And I caught a break because over in the corner of this clubhouse were two good members of Alcoholics Anonymous named Lou and Mark. And although it's the most important moment of my life, whether I live or die is probably about to be decided in the next few minutes. For Lou and Mark, it was Tuesday. You know what I mean? And these guys were where they were every Tuesday night between the 6 o'clock and the 8 o'clock meeting at the Simi Valley Alano Club. They were hanging out together, drinking AA coffee, telling AA war stories. But most importantly, they had their eyes trained on the room and they had their eyes trained on the door and they were looking for men to 12-step. And they took what I believe is the most important action we'll ever take in AA. These two good men took a 30-foot journey across the clubhouse to cordially welcome a man to Alcoholics Anonymous who was dying from the disease of alcoholism. And they did it in the nonchalant, friendly manner that we do it in AA. Hey, man, my name's Lou. This is Mark. We don't think we've met you. Hey, why don't you come sit with us? Let me tell you, that stuff, it saves lives. And here's why I think it's so important. It might have been 30 feet for Lou and Mark when they walked across that clubhouse. If you're expecting me to do that, I can't do it. That journey's a million miles. You know, I can't get my eyes off of my shoes. You know, don't you know where I've been, what I've done, who I've hurt? You expect me to go shake hands? What are you, out of your mind? I got nothing in the tank. My scorecard reads 0. You see, but these guys understood the terms of engagement for recovery from alcoholism, that they would have to carry the message to the alcoholic that still suffers. And they sat me down on the table and my journey began. And Mark became my sponsor that night. And in that moment, when I got a sponsor in AA, my life changed. And if you had told me you just had the most significant experience of your life, I would have said, what happened? I missed it. But here's the deal. I got an active member as a sponsor, which meant what? I would be an active member if I was willing to have it. He had a home group, which meant I had a home group if I was willing to have it. Commitments in AA, tethers, he called them, that tied him to our society and kept him from floating away, which meant I would have these commitments if I'm willing to have them. He was a student of the Big Book and actively engaged in the steps, which meant I'd be a student of the book, actively engaged in the steps, if I'm willing to have it. He had a million friends. He knew all of you. Now, what I didn't know is when you get a sponsor in AA, you inherit all their friends, which I'll be honest, when you're new, that does not feel like an asset, right? What it feels like is suddenly there's a bunch of strangers up in your business. But think about it this way. I'm at the low point of my existence. Nobody wants anything to do with me. And I meet all these strange new people in AA who find out everything there is to know about me, good and bad, really quickly. And they still love me, accepted me, and encouraged me. I mean, where do you get that kind of love and compassion anywhere on the planet except the love that one drunk has for another drunk coming in behind him? And I experienced that in AA. I couldn't figure out why you were so damn glad to see me, but you were. And you know who I like? This doesn't make me alcoholic. This makes me human. You know who I like? I like people that like me. That's human nature. And the members of Alcoholics Anonymous, the men and women in AA, when I was new, made me feel like they liked me. You know, it's one thing to tell somebody, keep coming back. But I'll tell you what, if they feel like you like them, you won't have to tell them to come back. because we all know that we go where it's warm, don't we? And I kept coming back to AA because that's where it was warm. And I got a sponsor who took me through all three sides of the triangle simultaneously: unity, service, recovery. And never once did he tell me he was doing that. Never once was he heavy handed about it. Never once did I feel like I was in a book study or being talked down to. His approach was shoulder to shoulder. He looked at himself as a drunk that didn't have a drink that day, and he was there to fulfill his obligation to the 12th step, that somebody had fulfilled their obligation with him, and his job was to pass it on. All he ever asked of me, he said, Don, when you get this thing and you recover from alcoholism, we just ask that you pass it on. That's all we want from you, to honor your link in the chain. And he used the ancient spiritual law and principle of the invitation to bring me into AA, to teach me how to be an AA member. And the reason we use invitation in AA rather than instruction or direction or ordering around is it leaves the sufferer with some degree of dignity and self-esteem. See, he never told me what to do. He would do things like, hey, Don, I got to set up this meeting tomorrow night. I got to be there early. I could really use your help. Could you show up? And I think to myself, wow, this guy needs my help. And people like to help people. And I would show up and help my new sponsor set up some meeting in AA. And when we were done, he'd shake my hand and he'd go, hey, man, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. I want to be clear, man. I had accomplished some things in my life, in business and other areas. I'd been some places, done some things. And I don't know why that meant more to me than all of it. You know, you made me feel like maybe I had a little gas in the tank. You made me feel like maybe there was a little strength left in me yet. And I started to learn how to be an AA member. And I learned it in all the ways that you need to learn to be an AA. I learned how to show up early, how to stay late. I learned how to work the steps. And the funny thing about working the steps is I only have one way to approach learning, if you will, and it's academic, which is kind of a problem because the steps aren't academic in nature. They're spiritual in nature. This isn't of the mind. This is of the heart. And my sponsor used to always illustrate that to me. I remember when we'd done all the work in the book about the first step, for example, and we get done with all that work. And he goes, do you think you've conceded to your innermost self you're an alcoholic? And I go, yeah, I think so. And he goes, well, let's find out. And he had me go home that night. And he said, sit on the end of the bed, right? He goes, no TV, no light, no nothing. Think one thought and one thought only. I'm an alcoholic. Do that for 10 minutes and call me up. And it sounded ridiculous, right? I go home, I get quiet, I turn the lights off, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic. And as I said it, it changed. And it seemed like every time I said it, something was attached to it. Something I had done that I had forgotten, something I had done that I hoped I had forgotten. And all this failure and all this pain and all this, and in billboard sized, neon lit information, I realized that if something big didn't happen in my life, I was going to drink again. And I called my sponsor up after 10 minutes and I said, man, I'm in a lot of trouble. And he said, now you get the first step. And he said, if I didn't understand the trouble I was in that first step, I'd never work the rest of them with the kind of attention and focus required. And that's the way he took me through the steps. He wanted me, he said, listen, man, you can quote the book till the cows come home. And he was a book guy. He knew the book inside and out. He goes, but if you don't understand the spirit of every step, what's underneath the ideas of this, you're not going to get the gift. And I went through the steps and it had the desired effect. And what's the desire? What's the promise of working the steps? That I get a nice car, a nice girl, a nice house, a nice career? Some of us do, some of us don't. But that's not what AA is about anyway. And that's not what it promises us. It tells me that I'll have a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. That's the gift. And it feels when you're new, and I'm living at my sister's house. I don't have a car. I haven't worked in a year. I'm 80 grand in debt to the IRS, and that's $1991, right? I have warrants for my arrest in 2 counties because I'm an overachiever. When you got that kind of stuff going on in your life, And they tell you, yes, you get to have a spiritual awakening. You don't see the value in it. But I understand the value today, because all it means is I get a spiritual awakening, which means I get to wake up, that I become awakened to the idea that there's a power available to me, and it's available to me right now. And I was asleep to that for all of my life until I came to AA. And now that I'm awake, what's the trick? Stay awake. And how many times have I gone back to sleep in Alcoholics Anonymous? Plenty. Trust me. But I get to be awake. And really, the steps, if you boil the steps down, if you take all the direction out of it and you just talk about spirit, what the steps really do is give us the honor and privilege of asking our Creator one question, and one question only, with nothing between us and the answer. And it turns out that the gift of being able to ask this question is the keys to the kingdom. It's the most important question we'll ever get to ask. And it is more important than anything in our universe. And here's the question: what would God have me do? And if you had told me that simple question would change and revolutionize my life, that because what it says in We Agnostics turned out to be true for me, deep down inside, every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. So what I'm looking for, I'm looking with. And if God is really a part of me, as the big book promises, when I ask that question, I'll always get an answer. And if I'm spiritually fit, I'll want to take action based on that answer. And my life started to change, because even early in sobriety, less than a year sober, because I was more spiritually fit than I'd ever been in my life, I was able to show up in courtrooms and take the heat. I was able to go through the amends process. And for the first time in my life, I stopped hiding behind the hedge of life. I started to stand up straight like a man, put my hand in the air and say, I'm the guy that did it. And I'm right over here. And I'm here to make it right, whatever it takes. And I didn't know how I'd make these things right. I didn't know how I'd make them right with my family, make them right with the IRS, make them right with the courts, make them right with ex-girlfriends, ex-employees. It seemed so much. But because I understood the spirit of the amends, I realized it wasn't about results. It wasn't about getting out of trouble. It wasn't about having them go my way. It was about what it said on page 77. My real purpose of making the amends is to fit myself to be a maximum service to God and the people about me. You see, I understood that what I'd signed up for in AA was freedom from alcohol through a life of service. Guy asked me once, I was 25 years sober at the time. He goes, how in the world did you get 25 years of sobriety? I said, I took 10,000 actions on behalf of other people, because that's what it feels like. But everything that we do that we think we're doing for somebody else it serves us. Because the enemy here isn't whiskey. I thought it was. There's a movie called, I won't mention the name of the movie. It's a Tom Cruise movie. And there's a scene where Tom Cruise is a hitman, right? And he shoots this guy and throws him out like a 3-story window. And Jamie Foxx looks at him and he goes, you killed him. And he goes, no, man, I didn't kill him. The bullets in the fall killed him. And you see, I'm the guy that blames whiskey. The bullets in the fall, that's whiskey for me. And I spend so much time thinking that's what killed me that I never get the real culprit. And the real culprit turns out to be my selfishness and my self-centeredness. And when I read that in the big book for the first time, and it said it was the root of my trouble, I disagreed with that. I mean, I get it. Like, all right, it's one thing for me to admit I'm selfish, but how in the world are you going to connect that with me dying? Well, if I come to believe that lack of power is my dilemma, right? And my very life as an alcoholic depends on accessing and being connected to this power, anything that tampers with that connection, interrupts that connection, blocks that connection, we could define as what? Infinitely grave. And nothing cuts me off from God more perfectly than what? Playing God. And, I remember the first time I read that in the big book, it says, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. And I go, that's ridiculous. I've never played God. I've never thought I was God. I remember arguing with my first sponsor about that. He goes, okay, He goes, let me ask you this. Do you at all times have an opinion about what everybody in the world does and what they should be doing instead? And I said, yeah. He goes, welcome to the world of playing God. I didn't know that my inability to accept life on life's terms, my inability to let the world be as the world is and let people have the same rights I demand to live your life any damn way you want. I didn't understand that sometimes that's a very minor and sometimes a very major way of playing God. It's subtle because even today, what moves me away from serenity, what moves me away from God in my life today at 29 years can usually be traced back to what? My opinions, my judgment of others. The things that Alcoholics Anonymous suggests that guys like me don't have the luxury of doing. But I've had a really great sober experience here in AA. I'm coming up on almost 3 decades of experience. And what that means is I've done a lot of things wrong and I've done a lot of things right. You see, I've had every experience, every joy, every abundance, every success that any human being can have. But I've also had every heartache, every failure, every fear that a human being, I've had a well rounded human experience. But through it all, I've come to Alcoholics Anonymous. Through it all, I've tried to be as transparent with you as possible. And because of that transparency, you know what I found out? You're having the same experience. That life, it turns out, is all the same for all of us. It's good, it's bad, it's happy, it's sad. It's a conveyor belt and it's built in a circle and it keeps bringing us the same stuff. And what they taught me in AA is don't get too stuck on any one thing. If it's really good, enjoy it, but don't get stuck on it. You may not be prepared for what's coming up behind it. And if it's bad, don't worry about it. It's passing. Something good's going to come and you're going to miss it if you're stuck on that thing that's bad. And how do we do that? How do we stop running the show? And in AA, they taught me, they drilled it into my head, and you continue to try to teach me today the importance of staying in the moment, the here and now. And the reason it's so important and why it's so difficult for a guy like me to stay in the moment, because my ego, my self-centeredness can't exist in the moment. It's always in the past and remorse or the future and worry. And I'm constantly being moved away by my self-centeredness away from the moment. And why it's so important for me to try to stay here right now with you is it turns out that's the only place I can meet God. I can't meet him yesterday. I can't meet him tomorrow. He's only in the moment. And that's where my power has to be. And that's where my work has to be done, right here, right now. And I've had that experience of being in my own skin in the moment in Alcoholics Anonymous more often than not, which is why I've had a very profound experience with my sobriety. And the profound experience isn't the things in my life that are maybe people that don't understand alcoholism would look at and say, wow, that AA really works. No, man, it's the bounce in my step and the glint in my eye. It's that you put me back in the game. You know, those promises in the chapter of Vision for You, where the guy's sitting there and he hears all about, he's being 12-stepped, right? Here's everything there is to hear about alcoholism. He goes, look, man, I get it. I understand now more than ever. I got to figure out some way to go about life and give up the drinking, but how can I? Do you have a sufficient substitute? And the men and women of Alcoholics Anonymous said, yeah, man, we got a substitute. And it's vastly more than that. It's a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous. Their life will mean something at last. Your imagination will be fired. The greatest years of your existence lie ahead. And that's what I found in Alcoholics Anonymous because of you. We talk a lot about God. We talk a lot about a power greater than ourselves, but I absolutely believe that God works through people, and I absolutely believe he works through you. We are not the well, but we are the pipe. And God has never spoken to me in a voice directly in my ear, but boy, I know he's spoken through you a bunch of times. I've heard things from you that saved my life, and it happens on a regular basis. But in order to be able to hear what you're trying to tell me, I have to stay in some type of humility, some type of teachability. And the ego is always the enemy. And we talk about ego as though it's something that we picked up on the bottom of our shoe while walking through a dirty alley. When I talk about ego, I'm talking about me. I'm talking about my selfishness. I'm talking about my self centeredness. And I'm talking about something I can never get rid of that wants to play God, that wants to step out into the front and make the decisions. And the problem is, I know a couple of things. One, I've never learned anything from what I already know. That's number one. Number two, I've never worked on a problem I don't have. Have you? And if I'm going to change and grow, because we talk about that here, transformation, we need to change, we need to grow in effectiveness and understanding of God's will. We talk about it all the time. And if I'm going to change, the number one component in change is being wrong. I cannot change unless I admit I'm wrong about something I once thought I was right about. It can't happen. And that's going to take some teachability and some open mindedness. And that's so easy when I'm new in AA and I'm broken in half and my life is in flames. A little bit tougher when my ego gets rebuilt. I got a few bucks in the bank. I have some success. I have a track record of being able to live life on life's terms. And when I get in that state where I cut God out, edge God out through my ego, I'm on dangerous turf. Because what I'm really trying to do here is get the answer to the riddle. That's what being sober is about. And what's the riddle? How in the hell do you live life on life's terms without putting something in your system to anesthetize yourself from reality? And what you've given me is that ability to live life on life's terms. But I'm better when I'm with you. I'm stronger when I'm with you. I'm more confident when I'm with you. I'm smarter when I'm with you. Everything that I looked for in a bottle, I get from the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the interesting thing about what you've encouraged me to do is understand the nature. And I've had sponsors that drill this into me to this day about the nature of my relationship with this power that we talk about. You see, I understand today that God is management and I'm labor. I get into trouble when I get that backwards. You see, when I think I'm management and God is labor, I put God in the position of being a butler, and he's not a butler. When I ask my Heavenly Father to do this, that, or the other thing for me, I'm telling him I know better than he does. And that's not what AA taught me. What AA taught me was it's the life of service to God and his kids. Because I'm going to wake up tomorrow. And one day at a time means something different to me today. Okay. When you're new, and if there's anybody new listening to this, I'll tell you what one day at a time means when you're new. If you go to bed tonight and you're sober, you've had a successful day in AA, and don't let anybody tell you anything different, particularly your head. You're doing great. After you're here a while, that's going to change. And today, I'm telling you, I can have the best spiritual day in the world today, and that's good. But tomorrow, it's valueless, right? Because my spiritual structures are built out of sand on a beach. And at night, God sends the waves in, right? What do we got to do in the morning? Start building every day, one day at a time. I got it. Because when I wake up tomorrow, I'm going to have a decision. Hey, Donnie, who are you going to serve? Because bet your bottom dollar, I'm going to serve somebody, right? I'm going to serve God and his kids, or I'm going to serve self, but somebody's getting served, right? So when I wake up, I need to make that decision. And it's funny. You read the directions in the big book about the 11th step, and it says, upon awakening, what's the first direction we're given? We ask God to direct our thinking, that it be divorced from self-seeking, selfish motives. How did Bill Wilson, our co-founder, know I wake up in self every day? You see, I'd love to tell you I'm not selfish anymore, but that'd be a lie, wouldn't it? I wake up thinking about me every damn day. I'll let you know when I wake up and I'm thinking about one of you. It ain't happened yet. So the very first thing I got to do is get out of the way. It turns out that whiskey wasn't the problem. I'm the problem. And I got to figure out how to get me off of me because I'm powerless. I come here and I got only a couple of things on the list that I'm powerless over, right? It's easy. Yeah, I'm powerless over alcohol and that other stuff. But that's it. Thank you very much. And what I've been doing for 29 years is I've been adding stuff to that list. And you get to this point of the game and you're like, I'm powerless over everything. I'm even powerless over getting myself out of the way. I got to ask for God to get me out of the way. I need divine intervention just to be willing to get to the power. And so you start to understand if you've got no power, it's no big deal. You know what's a big deal? When you don't have power and you think you do. And how much of my life have I wasted in AA acting like a guy that had power? And what I try to do is just remember that I'm not the power. I'm not the well. I may be the pipe on occasion, but I'm not the well. So I get up in the morning, try to get myself out of the way. Spirit and approach. It's not about words. It's not about memorization. It's not about academic approach to recover. It's about spirit and approach. If I can have the right spirit, God's management, I'm labor. My job is to serve him and his kids. Approach my life from that angle. I'm going to have a pretty good day. I don't even have to know what's going to happen. And I remember being new and talking to my sponsor and going, look, man, I get it. I got to help people. I got to serve people if I'm going to stay sober and have a good life. I get it. How will I know who I'm supposed to help? And he said, oh, Don, God made you. He knows everything about you. So he knows you're not very smart. So the people you're supposed to help, he's going to put them right in front of you so you don't miss them. And I've never forgotten that. What kind of world do you think we'd live in if we all got up tomorrow and we played that spiritual game that whoever we find in front of us is there by divine appointment? And the only reason they're standing in front of us at that moment in time is we're supposed to serve them. What kind of world do you think we'd live in if everybody lived that way? That's the freedom that AA gave a guy like me. I came here a slave to King Alcohol, and now I have the freedom. I can live my life any way I want. And I choose. If I have any choice at all, I choose the AA way. I choose a life of service. I choose a life of believing that if you're in front of me, that's there by divine appointment, that you're a blessing in my life. And my job is to try to be helpful to you. How often do I do that? And how often do I forget that? Depends on the day. Some days I'm much better at it than others. And some days I'll sit there at night and I review my day. This is where you know you had a bad spiritual day. You review your day and you think this, there must have been other people involved. But all I remember is me. That's a bad spiritual day. Because I'll tell you, when I'm connected to God, you have substance. You materialize. You become real in my life. When I'm in self-will, you're just shadowy players in the drama of my life. You know what I mean? It's all about me. And it's a horribly lonely way to live. I love Alcoholics Anonymous, man. I love being sober. I love what you've done with me. You did what nobody else could do. It's remarkable that I'm not a great guy, but I'm a good guy. You know, you took a guy from the negative column of life, a loser, and you put him in the plus column, you know, contributing member of society and everything that goes with that. And we do it so often. You guys take failures like me, losers like me, and you clean me up and throw me back into the game. We do it with such regularity, we miss the magnificence of it. Bill Wilson referred to what happens here as a wholesale miracle. Isn't that something? Because it's available to everybody. We tell our stories so the new man and the new woman can know the simple truth. If it happened for me, it can happen for you. I hope you stay. I hope we stay sober forever. Thanks for listening.